Good morning and welcome to Politics Nation. Today, the nation mourns the loss of John McCain, the Republican senator from Arizona who has died at the age of 81. McCain had a full life of achievements with the U.S. military, famously surviving more than 5 years as a prisoner of war, then as a senator for decades, and even a run for the presidency. This morning, we want to start by highlighting his life and career. With me here on set is presidential historian Michael Beschloss, radio talk show host Hugh Hewitt, and Democratic strategist Don Calloway. One of the things that, before we even get into the many moments of recognition and respect that the nation came to have for Senator McCain, but one of the things that struck me personally is that he could get along and reach out to people he disagreed with. He and I disagreed. In 2000, when he first ran for president, he had said things about the Democrats were getting too much like the Al Sharptons of the world, and I shot back. But then we met somewhere in the Capitol Hill, and he reached out and he said, you know, Al, at least you believe in what you believe in, and I do too. And we became friendly, and years later, as I started doing this show, I'd have his daughter on a couple of times a week. And I'll never forget, he stopped me at the Obama inauguration. He says, you know, Al, I want to thank you for respecting my daughter. Even though you disagree, it means a lot when your kids are respected. I said, well, I have daughters, I understand that. He was the kind of guy you could disagree with without being disagreeable. And in all of this rancor that we have in politics now, that's the thing I thought most about when I heard that he was, you know, facing this moment and then finally.
Great place to start what will be a long day, Al, of remembrances. He was a great radio guest, but I always opposed him in his runs for the presidency in 2000 and 2008 until he became the nominee. But he'd come on the show, and he's the funniest doggone guest anyone could have, because he'd yell at you and he'd make fun of you, and he's very relaxed in who he is. He's a great American, and as a fighter pilot, I read most of the stuff about Annapolis this morning. He was a contrarian in Annapolis. Michael can get into this. Maybe fighter pilots make great candidates. George H.W. Bush was a fighter pilot. George McGovern was a fighter pilot. Martha McSally's running for the seat in Arizona. She's a fighter. Maybe they just built into their garrulousness that they can get along with anyone that they're not trying to kill.
Well, Michael, let's go there. Tell us you're the historian. What are the highlights that we will remember about John McCain 50 years from now, 100 years from now? What will matter in history?
I think it starts with the kind of person he was. You know, as you were saying and as Hugh was saying, this was a guy who believed in making friendships across the aisle. You know, this is what the founders, they wanted. They wanted us to argue about all sorts of policies. They wanted conflict. They wanted a Congress where people duked it out. You know, That's not the way it was in a monarchy. They felt that if you had big debates and fights, you'd get the best policy. But at the same time, they wanted friendships. You know, they wanted these relationships. They wanted people to have civility. And just as you're all talking about, that was total John McCain. So if you're talking about John McCain in history, you've got to begin with his character, nowhere more demonstrated than by the courage with which he dealt with that 5.5 years as a POW in North Vietnam.
Where he could have been released because of his family, his father and his grandfather, and he refused to go.
Refused to go, and that gave him a moral stature that no matter what else he did in politics, whether you agreed with him or disagreed, this was someone of a higher plane.
Yeah, right.
You know, Don, one of the things that I think will also be part of the long legacy, and certainly no one can ever forget the 5 years he did as a prisoner of war and him being reelected 6 times, elected and reelected 6 times as Senate and all of that, is that when he came against doctors' advice and cast that deciding vote that really saved the Affordable Care Act that was before the Senate, and it was for the guy that beat him for president. I mean, I don't think anyone could ever capture that moment and put it in the right words.
You know, that should be framed on every American university's wall, the hands out and thumbs down. Such a dramatic moment, which we rarely find in politics, as you burn up to a slow build, and then, but you rarely have that, climactic moment that we saw that night in D.C.
Plus the thumb down.
The thumb down, right. Just an iconic moment in the history of the United States Senate. But we should place Senator McCain in the context of, Michael and Hugh and I, we all participate in this D.C. congressional industrial complex, if you will, where there are staffers and lobbyists and media folks like ourselves. But at the end of the day, leadership flows from the top. And in order for this town to work, in order for public policy in this country to work, you have to have members who are leaders and collegial and welcoming and willing to have discussions regardless of party or race or gender or any of this stuff. And what worries me is that Senator McCain was one of the last of the true benchmarks of that type of collegial leadership, who shows this town how to operate and shows how we can have discussions in a public policy universe without being so rancorous and hating each other. Because if people who are making policy in this town hate each other, that bodes terribly for the entire country. So it's a big, big loss here.
Listen to how Senator McCain said he wanted to be remembered.
What do you want to be remembered for? He served his country. That's what I'd like to see. He served his country, hopefully with the word honorably on it. That's all.
Will he be remembered for that, Michael?
Absolutely, more than most of us will be. And I think the other thing about him is that, it's a wonderful American story. You begin with that time at Annapolis. You were talking a little bit about it. Of all the people that we would have expected to grow up to be a great leader, that probably would not have been it. Fifth from the bottom of his class,
right.
This loutish sort of hellraiser, plus the son and grandson of these great Navy figures of World War II.
Which put a lot of pressure on him to live up to his father and grandfather.
Or maybe
which he probably rebelled to.
Yeah,
That's right.
Absolutely. But finally goes through all this and is a hero in Vietnam, comes back here and has this stellar political career. It's incredible.
He also has a legislative legacy that a lot of people don't know about, the Detainee Victims Act. He was very, very important to him, how people were treated once they were in detention, because he was so routinely tortured. But he did great work for Native Americans. He did great work for veterans. He did, of course, McCain-Feingold was found unconstitutional, but he was a campaign finance reform junkie. He has quite a long legislative record, and Chuck Schumer came up with an idea, and I don't often agree with Chuck Schumer, of renaming the Russell Senate building the McCain Senate building. I think that's a great idea, because Richard Russell's got some history that we don't really want to elevate, but John McCain's only got history you want to elevate.
President Trump tweeted his condolences last night, saying, "My deepest sympathies and respect go out to the family of Senator John McCain. Our hearts and prayers are with you." Meanwhile, President Obama issued this statement: "All of us can aspire to the courage to put the greater good above our own. At John's best, he showed us what that means, and for that, we are all in his debt." Don, you have President Trump, who it has been publicly said was not invited to whatever the funeral services will be this week, and President Obama, who defeated John McCain in 2008, has been asked to give one of the eulogies. That's right. Give us since you brought up how you are three creatures of the Beltway here in D.C. I'm the outsider here. I tend to have been that most of my life.
You and I are from the Midwest.
We're
really exemplary.
But you guys are comfortable on the Hill. Give us what that means on the Hill. Obama, who defeated him, giving one of the eulogies. Trump not invited.
Well, just 2 weeks ago, we saw the president at the passing of the defense spending bill refuse to mention Senator McCain's name, who the bill was named after. Far more important.
And everyone that spoke that day did not mention his name.
That's right.
Many of us suspect they were told not to mention his name. Clearly
at the direction of the current president. More importantly than being a creature of D.C., I'm a creature of the Southern Baptist Church, and you're Southern Baptist Church, my mom.
On my way to Alfred Street
right now.
Church
Shout out
today.
to Pastor Wesley, right?
Yeah.
I think that the lesson of John McCain is hopefully one that this president learns, is one of redemption. You know, we will give this president an opportunity to behave in a dignified fashion at the passing of our friend Senator McCain, and we hope that he can take some examples in the remaining 2 years, hopefully, of his presidency. We can take some examples of Senator McCain's dignified example of leadership, of how he tried to bring people together, of how he openly refused to buy into the politics of hate. We very much remember the woman saying that Obama's an Arab at his rally, and he rejected that to her face, right in
took the mic
in front of his party and set the example. And we can only hope, on a Sunday in the tradition of the Baptist Church, that President Trump has lessons in redemption and lessons in growing up, you know, being better than. And that is the lesson of Senator John McCain.
You know, you said you interviewed McCain a lot.
Yeah.
One of the things I always got when I was around him is that he made you act at least a little more mature. Like, you had to put your big boy pants on to be around.
He had to stand up straight in every green room. General Powell and John McCain go into a green room, everybody stands up and everyone listens. And that's uniform across my experience. The one what if no Bill Clinton, if no Ross Perot, the person who succeeds George H.W. Bush as the nominee in following 2 terms is John McCain. His timing was just this much off. In 2000, he had to go up against you're the presidential historian, but with Ross Perot not there, John McCain is the successor to H.W. Bush in the year 1996.
And the other thing is that, you know, people remember the 2008 campaign as something where Barack Obama was irresistible and impossible to defeat. But 10 years ago next week, McCain was nominated for president. First 2 weeks of September 2008, you look at the Gallup poll, running ahead was John McCain by 4 points.
And he picked Sarah Palin, who brought the Tea Party, who brought Donald Trump. I mean, history is funny in some respects.
You know, I think in many ways, you're right. John McCain was the heir to the great statespeople of the Republican Party, though I haven't often found in history that I agree that they were. But I will say for Senator McCain was a patriot, I believe, and believed in America. I think Donald Trump is probably an heir to Sarah Palin in terms of that acrimony and that kind of you against them kind of politics that she kind of brought into politics in 2008 and that he kind of brought to another level now, or to a lower level, depending on your opinion.
To his great credit, he never said a bad word about Sarah Palin.
Never.
John McCain,
nor question.
Nor question his decision
in public.
In public, but he would, even though she did launch the Tea Party, which did in turn bring about President Trump, and they are not friends. He never said a bad word about Sarah Palin. I've been waiting to see her statement. I haven't seen it yet. They spent a lot of time together. It was a controversial choice at the time. Changed American politics forever. That's why he's such a consequential figure.
Do you think that if John McCain had become president in 2008, this country would have never seen Donald Trump, and how would it have changed? You're the historian.
No question, because the Republican Party would have gone on a different trajectory. If Mitt Romney had become president in 2012, you would not have seen Donald Trump. So it does show that elections, especially presidential elections, do have consequences. But I think one great thing that John McCain's career shows is that you can be a senator for about 3 or 4 decades, and at times you can have as much influence as a president does.
That's right.
Don, this week we will be funeralizing Senator McCain and Aretha Franklin.
Did they know each other, by the way?
I wouldn't doubt that they did. I'm sure they've crossed paths. And I raised them both together because both of them distinguished themselves by having the courage to go outside their comfort zone.
That's right.
John McCain didn't always go along with the Republican established order.
That's right.
Aretha Franklin stepped outside of the black church that you talked about and went secular, but never, ever betrayed her church roots. And I think that part of the takeaway is that you've got to be firm enough and comfortable enough in who you are to be able to step outside and expand the territory for everybody.
That's right. If nothing else, Aretha Franklin is a black woman from Detroit who is a product of the black church, and she was proud of that, and she walked in that every single day. John McCain was an American patriot. His slogan in 2008, you remember, country first, and that is what he lived every day. Be yourself, be who you are to thine own self, be true, to quote Shakespeare, and there is a place for you in the American story, whether you are a war hero's grandson and son, or whether you are a singer in a church in Detroit. There's a place for you in the American story if you walk in your values and if you walk with integrity. We're thankful for the lives of both of them. And hope they don't cannibalize each other in media coverage of their funeral.
And only on Politics Nation can you find us synthesizing John McCain and Aretha Franklin.
It was well done, Rev.
I would say, Rev, take 30 minutes and sit by yourself in your car or in your room and don't say anything to anybody. Consider 5 years, the incredible sacrifice of being a prisoner of war for 5 years. And we could talk about that and throw out numbers.
And be given the option of being let go.
That's right.
But because you don't want to leave other prisoners, you won't do it. That's why I had to respect this man.
That's right.
I mean, because here's a guy that could have used privilege and didn't.
The rope torture is tough stuff to read. What he was had to endure when he was captured, he was beaten in the lake. It's tough stuff to read. He was blessed with a partner in Mark Salter, who helped him tell his stories in good books. Michael is the great writer as well. But it's a story that does, in fact, 5 years. 5 years of that stuff, every day getting beaten up and not cracking. That is a remarkable testament. There are other POWs that will all stand up and say that he was among us, and they said, we all leave in the order that we arrived, or we all leave together, but you don't go out of turn.
Well, I have to thank you all at this point. Thank you, Michael Beschloss, you, Hewitt, of course, and Don Calloway. Coming up,